Welcome to another OSAS tip of the month. I'm Melissa and we'll be talking about recurring entries within Global. We'll discuss where and when they're used, and then we'll walk through an example with setup and processing. So let's get started. We want to use recurring entries in order to simplify our data entry within AP, PO, AR, SO, and General Ledger. We can then automate entries where we may not receive an invoice or notification that a bill or invoice is due, which helps us increase our efficiency and our accuracy. So let's walk through an example. We'll walk through a pretty common example within our accounts payable application. And we'll go to Setup and Maintenance, Recurring Entries, in order to set up our recurring entry for a new bill we've received for our mobile device. We would enter a recur ID. It can be unique, or it should be unique. And then we already have some things in here, so we have some run codes, which you can reuse. They're not required to be unique, but for this purpose, I'm going to create a new one. Called mobile, and there is a limit of 6 characters to keep in mind on your run code. And then we'll come down into the header area and select our vendor. And our default information from the vendor comes in here, and we're able to enter a PO number. If we want to change it every month, then we would want to leave this blank, and then when we are able to review the transaction, we can enter that at a later time. Before heading down into the grid area of the lines, we want to click on Billing and ensure that our start date is the correct date of when we want this entry to begin. By default, that the reoccurrence ends at the cutoff date 1 year later, which this can be extended and adjusted to be shorter or longer. We'll go ahead and leave the cutoff date alone, and we'll also leave the starting date as it is, because this bill is due today and we need to generate a check for this. Our billing type, we have some options of being able to choose how often we want to have this run code brought in to be reviewed. Because this is a mobile bill, I'm going to choose monthly. The adjustment tab allows us to adjust for any tax, and it will hold that information here on the left side. Our totals tab will keep a running total of our lines and how much is on the lines if there are multiple, and then we can add any freight or miscellaneous charges here. And our history tab helps keep track of when we copied an order in to be reviewed, when it was billed and for how much, what that order number was, and who did the transaction. We'll come back and review this later in our video. For now, we'll go down and create a line item. Since this is a bill, I don't have an item ID. I'm just going to type in a description that it's a mobile, maybe it's Verizon. I'm just going to type Verizon here. And then make sure I choose the correct General Ledger account. And then update my unit cost. Once I've done this, then you click Save, and this saves our entry. Now what we'll do is go up to our Transactions menu into Copy Recurring Entries, and select our run code. We'll go ahead and just do our mobile run code. What this will do is it will pull our transaction into our accounts payable transaction screen for review. We can choose to do all of them or just one of them, and if we're going to do one of them, we'll just do a mobile as our 2 and just verify our cutoff date is correct, our due by date's correct, and make any adjustments to the batch code that we'd like to make. I'm just going to go ahead and change it to the default batch and click OK. Great. So now we have our confirmation that our entries have been copied, and we get an entry log that confirms, what recur ID we copied and what our transaction number is when we go into accounts payable transactions, and for what invoice amount we copied it for and for which vendor. So we'll go ahead and just close this out, and we'll move right into transactions and take a look at the entry. We'll go ahead and pull up the transaction here. And as we can see, it pulled in the data that we entered in our entry. If we needed to make any adjustments, typically maybe our bill is $50 a month, but there was an additional activation charge, and now our bill was higher, we could click Update and then change our cost here based on the bill that we have in our possession or what we see online. Everything looks good here, so I'm going to go ahead and post and go through the payment process. So if I go to transaction journals, I'm going to print my journal for my batch. I'm just going to go ahead and output that. When we review our journal, we'll see that we have confirmation of what it is that we've transacted. Next, we'll go ahead and post our transaction, making sure to select our batch, and the top box, click OK. Our post is successful. And then on the second page, we can see what GL transactions happened. So we can see we had a debit to our utility account and a credit to our AP account for getting ready to make that payment. Now if we go to pay our invoices, we'll just go ahead and go through this relatively quickly. We'll prepare our payments, entering the batch code that we want our payment to go into, and ensuring our invoices due is correct, our discounts due, and then click OK. It's been a while since we've made any payments in here, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is actually put a filter on so we only will see our vendor that we're interested in reviewing. Alright, now I have my vendor, I'm clicking OK. Oops. And yes, I want to start over because the last prepared payments I prepared, I wanted to just I wanted to get rid of those, and I want to isolate only for this one vendor. So we click yes. So now we should be good to go, and we can review and see that in our prepare payments we only have $50 that we're going to be paying. So that's perfect. That's what we wanted to see. So now we're going to just quickly print our check and post our payments. Alright, we got our check printed. I'm going to skip the payment register for these purposes and just go to posting our payments. So we can go ahead and review that history screen in the recurring entries. And we can take a look at what posting our payment and pulling it into a transaction, how that looks. So now that we've posted our payment, you can see the debit to AP and the credit to cash for the check that we cut. Going back to our AP recurring entry screen, we can see here we are on our mobile run code. I'm going to click the refresh screen, and we're going to locate our mobile recurrence, and we can see here is our order number, which coincides with the order transaction number that we did within the AP transactions. You can see when it was copied, which was today, when it was paid, which is today, for how much and who did that transaction. We can further validate that this has been paid by going into our AP transactions, doing a refresh, clicking our drop down, and now we have no transactions pending. Well, I hope today you learned something new today, and I appreciate your time. Thanks.